The photograph was tucked inside the zippered pocket of his duffel bag. I was never meant to see it. Marcus had stepped outside to take a phone call. I was only looking for a pen, nothing more. My fingers brushed against the smooth edge of the photograph, and I pulled it out. It showed a man standing outside Sullivan's Hardware on Maple Street, the hardware store that closed down 9 years ago. The man was me. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in handwriting I did not recognize, Walter Brennan. August 3rd, 2015. 4 days ago. 4 days before, what? I heard the sliding glass door open. I shoved the photograph into my cardigan pocket just as Marcus rounded the corner, his phone still pressed to his ear. "Sorry about that, Mr. Brennan," he said. "Now, where were we? Your afternoon pills?" I looked at his face. I had known this man for 7 weeks. He had come highly recommended by my son. He was efficient, kind, and utterly trustworthy. He had been watching me for a decade. If you've ever felt someone in your own home was trying to steal your peace or your sanity, subscribe. This channel is for people who refuse to be treated like a walking wallet. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 74 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom ranch house in Naperville, Illinois, the same house where I raised my 2 children and scattered my wife's ashes in the garden beneath the rose bushes she planted the year we moved in. Helen died 16 months ago, ovarian cancer. The doctors gave her a year, and she stretched it to 14 months through sheer stubbornness because Helen Brennan never let anyone else set her deadlines. She was an accountant, one of the best forensic auditors in the Midwest. She spent 40 years following money trails, finding discrepancies, exposing fraud. She understood numbers, the way I understand engines. She could look at a spreadsheet and see the story it was trying to hide. She also understood people. That was what made her dangerous in an audit and invaluable as a partner. She could read a lie the way I read a dipstick, measure the level, check for contamination, know exactly when something was running dirty. I wish I'd inherited that skill. Instead, I inherited her money, her house, and 2 children who looked at their mother's estate the way jackals look at a wounded gazelle. Kevin, my son, is 46. He works in pharmaceutical sales, which is a polite way of saying he drives around in a company car and takes doctors to expensive lunches. He wears suits that cost more than my first truck. He belongs to a golf club that charges more per year than I made in my first decade as a mechanic. He married a woman named Tricia, who has never worked a day in her life and complains about the difficulty of managing their housekeeper. I still remember the boy who used to fall asleep in the back of my pickup after Little League, dust on his face and a glove clutched to his chest. I don't see that boy anymore when Kevin walks through my door. My daughter, Sandra, is 43. She was the smart one, the one who got the scholarships and the honors. Then she married a man named Victor, who introduced her to the finer points of online gambling and credit card debt. She calls me every few weeks now, always with a new emergency, always with a number attached that needs to be wired immediately. She still asks about my blood pressure at the end of every call. Then she asks about my bank balance. She doesn't seem to notice that those 2 questions don't belong in the same breath. I love them. God help me, I love them both. But I have not trusted them since the reading of Helen's will. The will was straightforward. Helen left me everything: the house, the investments, the life insurance, the pension she'd accumulated over 4 decades of meticulous work. The estate was worth approximately $6 million, a number that seemed impossible for a mechanic and an accountant who had lived modestly their entire lives. But Helen had invested wisely. She had saved relentlessly, and she had never told the children exactly how much we had. Kevin and Sandra each received $25,000 in cash and a letter. Helen wrote them each a personal letter, sealed in envelopes with their names written in her careful script. I don't know what those letters said. Neither of my children has ever mentioned them. But I saw their faces when the attorney finished reading. I saw the way Kevin's nostrils flared, the way Sandra's lips pressed into a thin white line. I saw them look at each other across the conference table with a silent fury that excluded me entirely. That night, Kevin called to check on me. "Dad, you need to think about the future," he said. "That house is too much work for one person. The yard alone must be exhausting. What if something happens? What if you have a fall? You're all alone out there." I told him I was fine. 2 weeks later, Sandra called with the same concerns, using almost identical language. "Dad, we're worried about you. You seem off lately. Did you take your heart medication today? You forgot to call me back yesterday. That's not like you." I hadn't forgotten. I'd been at the VFW hall playing poker with my buddies from the shop. I'd told Sandra about it 3 days earlier. She'd nodded and said how nice that sounded. She did not remember, or she was pretending not to remember. That was when I started paying attention. The small things added up first. My truck keys disappeared from the hook by the garage door and reappeared in the refrigerator beside the orange juice. I found my reading glasses in the bathroom cabinet, balanced on top of a bottle of pills I did not remember buying. The shopping list I'd written vanished from the counter, only to show up crumpled in my jacket pocket with items I would never purchase: whiskey, sleeping pills, drain cleaner. I told myself I was being forgetful. That was what Kevin said when I mentioned the keys. "Dad, it happens to everyone. You're getting older. The mind just does that sometimes." But my mind didn't feel broken. My mind felt sharp, alert, suspicious. I spent 50 years as a diesel mechanic. I diagnosed problems for a living. I listened to engines and heard what was wrong before I even opened the hood. And right now, something in my life was running rough, misfiring on all cylinders. So I started writing things down. I kept a small notebook hidden in my toolbox in the garage, a place no one ever looked because no one in my family had ever learned to turn a wrench. I recorded every strange occurrence, every misplaced object, every conversation that felt slightly wrong. The notebook filled up faster than I expected. Then came the doctor's appointments. Kevin arranged them. He said he had found a wonderful new physician, a Dr. John Hartwell, who specialized in geriatric care. He said the man was brilliant, that he had helped Trisha's grandfather tremendously when he started showing signs of decline. I didn't want to go. I had a doctor, Dr. James Chen, who had been treating me for 20 years. But Kevin insisted. He said Dr. Chen was old-fashioned, that he wasn't up to date on the latest research. He said this Dr. Chen, Hartwell, could run comprehensive tests, could catch problems before they became serious. Think of it as a tune-up, Dad, like taking your truck in for service. So I went. Dr. Hartwell was smooth, professional, and deeply unsettling. He asked questions that felt less like medical inquiries and more like interrogations. He wanted to know about my daily routines, my financial decisions, my relationship with my children. He asked if I ever felt paranoid, if I ever suspected people of watching me, if I ever had thoughts that seemed irrational or unfounded. I told him no. He prescribed new medications. He said my blood pressure was slightly elevated, my cholesterol needed attention, my sleep patterns were concerning. He handed me a bag of pill bottles and instructed me to take them exactly as directed. I took them home. I lined them up on my bathroom counter. I did not take a single one. Instead, I drove to a pharmacy 3 towns over and paid a technician $50 to tell me what was actually in those bottles. The blood pressure medication was legitimate, the cholesterol pills were sugar tablets, and the sleeping pills were not sleeping pills at all. They were benzodiazepines, the technician explained. usually prescribed for severe anxiety disorders. In high doses, especially in elderly patients, they could cause confusion, memory loss, and symptoms that mimicked early-stage dementia. I drove home in silence. Then I flushed every pill down the toilet and refilled the bottles with vitamins from the grocery store. Same size, same color, same shape. If someone was checking to see that I was taking my medication, they would find full compliance. But I would not be swallowing a single dose of their poison. 3 weeks after I flushed the pills, Kevin called with wonderful news. "Dad, I found someone to help you around the house. A caregiver. His name is Marcus Webb. He comes with incredible references, and he's available to start immediately." I told him I did not need a caregiver. "It's not about need, Dad. It's about quality of life. Marcus can help with cooking, cleaning, driving you to appointments. He's trained in elderly care. He'll be like a companion." I told him I had companions. I had the guys at the VFW. I had my poker night. I had the garden. "That's not the same," Kevin said, and his voice hardened just slightly. "You need someone there full time. Someone who can make sure you're taking your medications, keeping up with your routines." Sandra and I talked about it. We both agree. This is the right move. I asked how much this caregiver would cost. "Don't worry about that. We'll take care of it." Kevin and Sandra had never taken care of anything in their lives. Every financial rescue had come from Helen or from me. The idea that they were now voluntarily paying for my care was laughable, unless they were not paying, unless the money was coming from somewhere else, unless this was not about care at all. I agreed to meet Marcus. He arrived on a Monday morning carrying a small suitcase and a canvas bag filled with cleaning supplies. He was perhaps 50 years old, with close-cropped gray hair and steady dark eyes that seemed to take in everything without judging any of it. He was polite, efficient, and skilled. He made my bed with military precision. He prepared a lunch of grilled chicken and steamed vegetables without asking what I wanted to eat. He organized my medications on the counter and reminded me gently when it was time to take them. I pretended to swallow the pills. He watched me do it, and something flickered behind his eyes, something I could not name. For 7 weeks, Marcus lived in my house. He cooked, cleaned, drove me to appointments, and reported my condition to my children during weekly phone calls I was not supposed to know about. I knew about them because I installed a voice-activated recorder in the kitchen, hidden behind the coffee maker. Old technology, easily overlooked. I listened to Marcus's conversations while I sat in the garage, pretending to organize my tools. "He's compliant," Marcus told Kevin during one call, "taking all his medications, showing signs of mild confusion, just like the doctor predicted." I'd say we're right on schedule. On schedule for what? I needed to know who this man really was. That was when I found the photograph. I did not confront Marcus immediately. I'd learned that much from Helen. She used to say the most dangerous thing you could do in an investigation was reveal your findings too early. Information was leverage, evidence was power, and right now, I had something Marcus didn't know I had. I had proof he was lying. The photograph burned in my cardigan pocket all afternoon. I smiled at Marcus during dinner. I thanked him for the meatloaf, which was bland and overcooked but competently prepared. I excused myself early, claimed fatigue, and locked myself in my bedroom with my toolbox notebook. I wrote everything down. "10 years ago, almost to the month. I was 64 then, still working at the shop, still hauling engine blocks and rebuilding transmissions. Helen was still alive. We had just come back from a trip to Door County, where we ate too much cheese and walked along the shore like newlyweds. 4 days before what? I racked my memory trying to reconstruct that week. August 2015. What had happened 4 days after the 3rd? August 7th. I closed my eyes and let the date wash over me. August 7th, 2015 was the day Helen came home from work early with a strange look on her face. She said she'd discovered something troubling during an audit. She said she needed to make some calls. She spent the rest of the evening in her office with the door closed. She never told me what she found, but someone had been watching me 4 days before she discovered it. Someone had taken a photograph and written a note that suggested they knew something was coming. That was impossible. Unless it wasn't about predicting the future, unless it was about documenting the past. I needed more information. The next morning, while Marcus was at the hardware store picking up supplies for a leaky faucet, I searched his room. He'd taken the guest bedroom at the end of the hall, the one Kevin used to sleep in before he moved out. The model airplanes still hung from the ceiling. The faded Cubs pennant was still on the wall. Marcus's possessions were minimal and carefully organized. A few changes of clothes in the closet, toiletries in the attached bathroom, a laptop on the desk, password protected. I found his phone charger plugged into the wall, but no phone. He must have taken it with him. I was about to give up when I noticed the corner of a manila envelope peeking out from beneath the mattress. I pulled it out. Inside were more photographs. Dozens of them. They spanned years, decades. There I was at Kevin's high school graduation, standing between my son and my wife, beaming with pride. There I was at Sandra's wedding, wiping my eyes during the father-daughter dance. There I was at Helen's retirement party, holding a cake with her name written in blue frosting. There were photos I had never seen before, taken from angles that suggested hidden cameras or telephoto lenses. Me walking out of the bank. Me sitting alone at the diner on Route 34. Me visiting Helen's grave, kneeling on the grass, speaking to the headstone. Each photograph had a date written on the back. Each photograph documented a moment in my life I thought had been private. At the bottom of the envelope was a letter. It was written on heavy cream-colored paper, the kind Helen used for important correspondence. The handwriting was unmistakable. I'd seen it on birthday cards and grocery lists and love notes tucked into my lunchbox when I worked double shifts. It was Helen's handwriting. The letter was addressed to Marcus. Dear Marcus, if you are reading this, then the conditions have been met. I am gone, and you have determined that my children have begun their campaign against their father. I want you to understand something important. I knew this would happen. I did not want to believe it. I spent years hoping I was wrong about Kevin and Sandra, hoping that my money had not corrupted them, hoping that their love for their father was stronger than their hunger for what he represents. But I built my career on following evidence. I knew my children's hearts, even when I wished I did not. 12 years ago, I hired a private investigation firm to document our family, not because I suspected anything at the time, but because I believed that truth was the only foundation worth building on. I wanted a record. I wanted evidence, should evidence ever be needed. You were assigned to our case. You photographed my husband for years, documenting his life, his routines, his relationships. You never once revealed yourself. You never once violated his privacy beyond what was necessary for the record. I trust you because you had every opportunity to exploit what you knew, and you never did. The enclosed documents will explain everything. The second will, the conditions, the inheritance. Your job now is simple. Protect Walter. Watch over him. And when the time comes, reveal the truth. He will be angry, he will feel betrayed, but he will also be safe, and that is all I ever wanted for him. With gratitude and trust, Helen Brennan. I sat on Marcus's bed, the letter trembling in my hands. Helen had known. She had known for 12 years that our children might one day turn against me. She had hired someone to document our lives, to gather evidence, to stand ready for the moment when her fears became reality. She had never told me. The betrayal hit me like a wrench to the chest. My wife had kept secrets. She'd watched me through a stranger's lens and planned for a future where I'd be alone and vulnerable without ever telling me. But under the anger was something else, relief. Because Helen had been right. Kevin and Sandra were trying to destroy me. They had hired a corrupt doctor to poison my mind. They had planted a spy in my home. They were waiting for me to deteriorate enough that they could have me declared incompetent and seize control of everything. And my wife, even from the grave, had sent me a guardian. I heard the garage door open. Marcus was back from the store. I slipped the letter back into the envelope, slid it under the mattress, and walked out of the room. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. I had more questions than answers. But for the first time in months, I did not feel alone. If you've ever had to question the people closest to you just to stay safe, like this video, and stay with me, nobody gets to rewrite your life while you're still breathing. I waited 3 days before confronting Marcus. I needed time to process what I'd learned, time to read the other documents in that envelope, the ones I'd quietly photographed with my phone while he was at the hardware store. Time to understand exactly what Helen had set in motion and what she expected me to do about it. The documents were dense, legal, and devastating. Helen had created a second will 9 years before her death. It was held by a law firm I'd never heard of, Westbrook and Associates, in a suburb west of the city. The will was a conditional inheritance, something that only came to life if certain boxes were checked. On paper, the primary beneficiaries of Helen's public will were me and our children. But the second will superseded the first if specific conditions were met. The conditions were simple and terrible. If Kevin or Sandra engaged in financial exploitation, medical abuse, or any form of elder mistreatment against me, they would be automatically disinherited. No arguments, no family discussion. The evidence had to be hard proof of fraud, conspiracy, or harm, verified by an independent investigator and delivered to Westbrook and Associates within 24 months of Helen's death. We were 16 months in. The clock was already ticking when Kevin offered me my tune-up. Marcus was that investigator. He'd been watching our family since 2013. He had files on Kevin's gambling debts, hidden from Tricia in offshore accounts. He had records of Sandra's spending habits, the payday loans, the maxed-out credit cards she refinanced every 6 months just to keep the lights on. He had transcripts of conversations, emails, text messages that painted a picture of two people who saw their parents as piggy banks, not family. Helen had seen it all. She had documented it all. And she had built a fail-safe. If the kids proved themselves morally unfit, the money, all of it, would go to charity. The house would be donated to a veterans organization. The investments would fund scholarships for first-generation college students. Nothing would go to Kevin. Nothing would go to Sandra. They would inherit only the knowledge of what they had thrown away. On the 4th day, I found Marcus in the kitchen, making my breakfast. He looked up as I walked in, his expression warm and professional as always. "Good morning, Mr. Brennan. I made your favorite, scrambled eggs with cheese and toast." I sat down at the table. "How long were you going to wait before telling me the truth?" I asked. Marcus's hand paused over the frying pan. He didn't turn around. What truth would that be? I reached into my cardigan pocket and took out the photograph, the one of me standing outside Sullivan's Hardware in 2015. This truth, I said. Marcus turned off the stove. He set down the spatula, wiped his hands on a towel, and walked to the table. He sat across from me, his hands folded on the surface. Your wife said you would find out eventually, he said. She said you were sharper than anyone gave you credit for. Helen said a lot of things, I replied. Apparently most of them were to you. Marcus shook his head. Not most, just the important ones. Then he told me everything. Helen had hired Westbrook and Associates in 2013, 2 years after Kevin's first major gambling loss. She had watched her son beg for money, watched her daughter manipulate her way into bailouts, watched both of them treat every family visit like a shakedown. She loved them. That was the tragedy. She loved them, and she knew they did not love her back. Not really. They loved what she represented: security, wealth, the promise of a comfortable retirement they hadn't earned. She could have cut them off entirely. She considered it. But she couldn't bear to do that to me. She knew how much I loved our children, how much I wanted to believe the best in them. So she created a compromise. She gave them a chance. The public will was a test. If Kevin and Sandra honored their mother's memory by treating their father with dignity and respect, they would eventually inherit everything. The second will would never be triggered. The evidence would stay in a vault, gathering dust. But if they chose greed over love, they made their choice, Marcus said softly. The moment they contacted Dr. Hartwell, they sealed their fate. I asked Marcus about the medications. He confirmed what I'd suspected. Dr. Hartwell was not a legitimate physician, not anymore. He'd lost his medical license 5 years earlier after a malpractice suit involving an elderly patient and a fraudulent competency assessment. Now he worked as a consultant for people who needed elderly relatives declared mentally unfit. Kevin had found him through a contact at his golf club. The plan was simple: gradually introduce medications that would cause dementia-like symptoms, document the decline with regular visits, then petition the court for guardianship, using Dr. Hartwell's testimony as expert evidence. Once guardianship was established, Kevin would have full control of my finances. He could sell the house, liquidate the investments, drain the accounts. He could put me in a facility or keep me drugged and confused in a back bedroom while he gambled away my money. Sandra wasn't the mastermind, but she was fully complicit. She'd agreed to support Kevin's petition in exchange for a 40% share of whatever they got. She'd signed documents. She'd attended meetings. She looked her brother in the eye and agreed that her father's mind was a small price to pay for financial freedom. I listened to Marcus describe my children's betrayal in clinical, documented detail. I did not cry. I'd spent all my tears months ago, lying awake at 3 in the morning, wondering if I was going crazy, wondering if the confusion was real, wondering if my children were right to be concerned. Now, I knew the truth. The confusion was manufactured. The concern was performance, and my children were strangers wearing familiar faces. What happens now? I asked. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened a secure app. Now we gather the final evidence, he said. Your wife was thorough, but she wanted the proof to be undeniable. We need Dr. Hartwell on record admitting the fraud. We need Kevin or Sandra confirming the plan, preferably both. How do we get that? Marcus smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since he arrived. We give them what they want, he said. We let them think they've won. Over the next 2 weeks, I became the perfect victim. I started making mistakes. I called Kevin by his grandfather's name. I forgot appointments. I asked Marcus the same question 3 times in an hour. I left the stove on and pretended not to notice the smoke alarm. Kevin started visiting more often. He came with a notebook documenting my decline, with concerned expressions and leading questions. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. He asked what day it was, what year it was, who the president was. I answered incorrectly, just often enough to be convincing. Sandra called every day, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Oh, Dad, that must be so scary. Do you want me to come stay with you?" "Kevin says you've been having trouble remembering things." I told her I was fine. I told her Marcus was taking good care of me. I told her I didn't know what I'd do without such a wonderful caregiver. Meanwhile, Marcus was building the case. He recorded Kevin's conversations with Dr. Squith Hartwell using a device hidden in his car, placed there by an associate who specialized in surveillance. He documented Sandra's text messages, obtained through a legal subpoena triggered by Helen's attorney. He compiled financial records showing the debts both children had accumulated, the desperation driving their scheme. The file grew thicker every day, and I grew angrier. But I didn't let them see it. I shuffled around my house like a confused old man. I took my vitamin pills and pretended they were poison. I played my part in their little tragedy, knowing the final act was getting close. The petition for guardianship was filed on a Thursday. Kevin had Dr. Ton Hartwell's assessment, sworn statements from Sandra about my decline, and a mountain of fabricated evidence suggesting I was a danger to myself and others. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. That gave us 4 days. I told them I was tired of fighting. Kevin arrived first. Sandra came 30 minutes late, as usual. Marcus served the meal, and we ate in silence until Kevin cleared his throat. "Dad, we need to talk about Monday." "Yes," I said, "I suppose we do. Look, Dad, Monday is just a formality. Dr. Hartwell will tell the judge what's going on. I'll get guardianship, and then we can finally make sure you're taken care of." "In a facility," Sandra added, "somewhere safe." "And the house?" Kevin shrugged. "We'll sell it. You won't need it anymore." I looked at my children, the faces I had watched grow from infancy. The people I had sacrificed for, worried about, loved without conditions. They did not love me back. "Marcus," I said, "the dessert." Marcus set a silver tray in the center of the table and lifted the dome. Underneath was a stack of documents bound with red ribbon, a USB drive, and a photograph of Kevin shaking hands with Dr. Graff Hartwell outside the Riverside Golf Club. Kevin went pale. "What is this?" he demanded. "Your mother's legacy." I told them everything. The second will. Marcus, the investigator their mother hired 12 years ago. The conditions they had just triggered. The inheritance they had just forfeited. Kevin shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous." "You're paranoid, Dad. This is exactly what we were worried about. Sit down, Kevin." The voice came from the doorway. Charles Westbrook stepped into the dining room, tall, silver-haired, holding a leather briefcase. "Who the hell are you?" "Your mother's attorney, executor of her secondary estate." He opened his briefcase and laid documents across the table. "Dr. Hartwell has agreed to provide testimony in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's confirmed Kevin paid him $75,000 to falsify assessments. He's provided recordings, texts, and financial transfers." Kevin's face went gray. "We also have documentation of Sandra's involvement," Charles continued. "Signed agreements, bank transfers, recorded conversations." Sandra collapsed into sobs. Dad, please. I didn't know what else to do. The cards, the loans, Kevin said this was the only way out. She didn't say Kevin made her. She said he gave her an option. She took it. Your mother wanted you to take care of yourselves, I said. When you couldn't do that, she wanted you to at least take care of me. You failed both. Charles finished laying out the documents. Per the conditional will, Kevin and Sandra Brennan are hereby disinherited. All assets will transfer to the Brennan Foundation for elder protection upon Mr. Brennan's death. The doorbell rang. Kevin froze. Marcus opened the front door. 4 uniformed officers and 2 detectives stood on the porch, squad cars flashing at the curb. Kevin Brennan? Sandra Brennan Mitchell? The lead detective held up a warrant. You're under arrest for elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Kevin looked at me, eyes wild. Dad, call him off. We're family. You should have thought about family before you tried to steal my mind. The handcuffs clicked shut. I watched them lead my children out of the house where they had grown up. I watched them duck into separate squad cars. I watched the neighbors gather on their porches, whispering, "Good, let them talk." Charles stepped beside me. Turns out you're not the first family he's done this to, not by a long shot. I nodded. I felt satisfied. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the text messages, Dr. Hartwell's testimony after he turned state's evidence. The jury heard Kevin and Sandra discuss how to handle the old man. They heard them calculate how much money they'd get once I was institutionalized. Kevin was convicted on all counts. 8 years. Sandra got 4 as an accessory. I attended every day of the trial. I wore my best suit, the one Helen bought me for our 50th anniversary. I looked my children in the eyes whenever they glanced my way. They stopped glancing after the first week. I did not stay for the sentencing. I had work to do. 6 months later, the Brennan Foundation for Elder Protection opened its doors. It started as a modest operation, a converted office complex, a legal clinic, a hotline for seniors who suspected they were being exploited. Then donations poured in from people who'd seen the news coverage, people who recognized their own families in Kevin and Sandra's faces. Marcus runs the day-to-day operations now. He has a gift for making frightened people feel safe. I asked him once why he'd spent so many years watching other people's lives instead of building his own. Your wife asked me the same thing, he said. I told her some people are meant to build, and some are meant to protect. I understood that. Helen found her purpose in numbers. I found mine in engines. Marcus found his in standing guard. I still tend Helen's roses every morning. I still play poker at the VFW on Thursday nights. But now, I also review case files for the Foundation. I speak at community centers. I testify before legislators. I am 75 years old, and I have more purpose than I've ever had in my life. Every night before I sleep, I look at Helen's photograph on my nightstand. Thank you, I tell her. Thank you for believing I was worth protecting. Then I turn out the light and sleep, the sleep of a man who has seen justice served. I learned that the people who love us most are not always the ones who share our blood. They're the ones who show up, who protect us, who build something that will last even after they're gone. If you believe no elder should be drugged, gaslit, or harvested for cash, subscribe and share this story, and tell me in the comments if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted so nobody has to face it alone.